From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay.
I hope when families come here, they get a sense of tranquility and comfort.
Healing through gardening, how this green spot is helping honor our service members.
Hey, stay tuned, folks. Coming up, I've got a pair of super conditioned tractors from the 1980s to tell you about.
And the president sounding more and more optimistic that a trade deal can be reached with China.
I think we will have a great relationship with China. Hopefully we'll make a deal.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The president saying China wants to make a deal and that he may not have to impose further tariffs on the country. He says he has received a response from China to his demands that was largely complete. Just those comments from the president sent stocks rising Friday. But the president also said if there isn't a deal, that the U.S. is doing very well, just the way it is right now.
We have tariffs coming in on $250 billion worth of goods, and we're talking about billions and billions of dollars a month will flow into our country and has already started flowing into our country that comes from China. So China's never been put in this position, and I don't want to put them in a bad position. I want to put them in a great position.
Attention now turns to the G20 summit in Argentina later this month. That's when President Trump will meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. But will that end in a deal? Moody's forecasting the financial strain between the two countries will in fact escalate after the first of the year, and they don't expect to see much of a breakthrough at the G20. Also, U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer is denying a report that he told some industry executives that another round of U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports had been put on hold as the two nations pursue talks. The ag letter from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago showing farmland values in the third quarter are 1% higher than a year ago, but values for good agricultural land in the third quarter were 1% lower than the second quarter. Ag credit conditions for the district seem worse relative to a year ago, and officials say there are credit uncertainties and they're growing as more farmers are unable to pay their loans off in full every year. So is it still a good idea to use land as collateral?
Absolutely, it's wise to use land as collateral. I think a lot of lenders, BMO Harris included, about 7 years ago put a cap on how much we'd lend on farmland, because we anticipated eventually interest rates were going to rise, prices were going to fall. Guess what? That's the circumstance we're in today. So I think lenders, banks, are not out of line in terms of the collateral value, but it's still going to hurt on the borrower's balance sheet, no doubt about that.
One of the trends, operating loans and non-real estate lending, is on the uptick. But Fed officials say at the same time there's trouble brewing for banks to be able to fund all the activity with interest rates going up. Meanwhile, work continues on the new USMCA. 2 days of hearings were held last week before the U.S. International Trade Commission. Those meetings will offer a roadmap to the issues that lawmakers will consider. The International Trade Commission will have until mid-March to deliver its report to Congress. The president's negotiators are optimistic Democrats will get on board with the new deal, but there's no timetable for ratification. Lawmakers also continuing to work on a new farm bill. During the lame duck session, Senate Ag Chairman Pat Roberts telling Politico farm bill negotiators could have a deal by today, saying they're working on a nutrition title that takes ideas from both the House and Senate bills. The Kansas Republican saying, quote, "We're close now." A Washington insider says one item still under discussion, the rental rate paid to farmers to take acreage out of cultivation with the Conservation Reserve Program. That rate has to be lowered to pay for the boost in CRP's maximum acres. You never know what's going to show up in the fields, as meteorologist Mike Hoffman shows us in today's Crop Comments. Mike?
That's right, Clinton. A first for Dustin Olson in west central Nebraska. Look closely and you can see an elk in the field. Dustin says he spotted it standing out in his cornfield in Custer County. Nebraska is not a big state for elk, but experts say the herd is growing thanks in part to conservation efforts. And taking a look at the drought monitor, Obviously, no issues east of the Continental Divide in most places, but the Four Corner region, Oregon, Southern California is still a concern as we head toward next growing season. We'll talk more about your forecast coming up, but first, here's some hometown temps.
Plan for the unexpected with weather forecast updates. Local forecasts are delivered right to your cell phone each morning, making planning a little bit easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
Cows born without those pesky horns, or how about pigs that never reach puberty? They could become a reality. A company wants to alter farm animals by adding and subtracting genetic traits in a lab.
Dairy cows, like Holsteins, grow horns, and they're quite dangerous for human workers and also for their fellow cows, and so they're normally manually removed. It's kind of a pair of molecular scissors, if you will, that you can tell to go and cut the DNA at a very precise location in the genome. And what that enables you to do is go in and very precisely alter one particular gene of the thousands of genes that make up the genome, and you can introduce useful genetic variations.
A lot of the consumer resistance to accepting GMO technology is that we're moving foreign genes from other organisms. Using genome editing, what we're doing is changing the sequence of the DNA in the plant, the natural sequence itself. Fruit's already coming down.
Get down to the individual grove.
You see very small leaves.
Tango characteristic.
For Florida, it has cut our production from about 240 million boxes, maybe 15 to 18 years ago, down to 45 million boxes in the last season.
I think the vast majority of the products will be safe, but somebody needs to be looking out for those cases where a mishap may happen or the developer of the product may miss some important health or environmental consequence.
A busy month for traders so far. What our analysts say you should be focusing on in the immediate future, and later, a garden that's about much more than plants. How it may actually aid in healing. That's ahead on In the Country.
AgDay, brought to you by Prosaro Fungicide from Bayer.
Mixed results again Friday for corn and soybeans. For more, let's go to the floor of the CME.
Let's talk about corn. We're about ready to close that market here. A little lower as we speak, going to tape. But talking to the traders and speculators around the floor and upstairs with all the information that we've got coming through, sometimes when things get quiet, we turn to the technicals because we kind of want to see what the technicians are looking at. And boy, oh boy, there's a story building there. If you're a Bollinger Band follower, the bands have been in their narrowest level, the 14-month Bollinger Bands at the narrowest level for 50 years, okay? Well, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you we're getting ready to make a move. And we've kind of traded down to these levels here in corn where most of the speculators and the guys we speak to are thinking that that move could really be an up move. So a little bit of support there. That story's giving the market a little support, even though we're off a little bit today. But keep an eye on that because that definitely is doing the rounds. Now, so that's it from me. I'm Scott Shelley here on the CME Group floors in Chicago.
Here at the Agribusiness Desk, we have Sam Hudson, Corn Belt Marketing, and Angie Setzer with Citizens Grains. All right, okay, guys. We've kind of had a busy November already. We're getting into a holiday week. What have we learned so far this month, the last 10 days? Sam, we'll start with you.
I would say trade wars aren't easy. You know, we continue to see all kinds of political rhetoric in regards to negotiations, China revising 10 years of production, you know, history out of nowhere and adding, you know, almost 6 billion bushels to the world corn balance sheet. There's just a lot of things, you know, this year has thrown at us. At this point, we've also learned that the yield is big, the crops are big, but they're estimatable now, I guess if that's a word.
Yeah,
you know,
no,
they're predictable. We know that they're not going to get much larger, and it becomes more of a demand-led market at this point, and that's why the trade negotiations the next few weeks, even months ahead, are so important.
Okay, Angie, what'd you learn?
What I thought I knew, I do not know.
Okay.
I don't know. I just, it's really been one of those things that this past couple of weeks have made me a little angsty, if you will.
Yep.
I'm going to dust off my teenager music cabinet and start listening to that again. But yeah, I mean, the trade war conversation, the rhetoric, you know, how easy it is to basically lead folks that may not have a complete understanding. If I see another picture of a giant pile of soybeans in North Dakota, I'm going to lose my mind. You know, simply because of all of the conversations that we've seen really kind of focus on that. So it's been, I think it's been rough for everyone. I think for a lot of farmers, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions, a lot of fear even. And I think we just have to go back to, you know, what my boss always tells me, block and tackle. So basically, you know, just focus on what you know, what you can accomplish, what you know you want to try to accomplish, and work on that, and kind of maybe try as best as you can to close out those things that you cannot control, simply because you can't do anything about them anyway.
Right.
So,
right. Sam, if you were going to give someone real quick advice for the next month, what would you say?
Focus on merchandising, and I think subtly, maybe that was in your message, Angie, is just, you know, control what you can control. We've seen basis levels improve. There's still some carry in the market because crops are large, and I think one needs to focus on that and not try to outguess the trade war situation. We're going to have to adjust enough as is moving forward.
All right. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate your insights as always. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
For help solving your cash grain problems, call Angie Setzer with Citizens LLC at 800-858-3738. For marketing advice, call Sam Hudson with Corn Belt Marketing at 800-655-3380.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Your meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, November has been much chillier than most people anticipated, and even some of the forecasters put out. Are we stuck in this pattern, or will it change at some point? Do we know yet?
Well, and we saw this pattern coming. We expected it, and that's exactly what's going on. Is the trough in the east, the ridge in the west. I do see it letting up a little bit as we end November, though. As you can see, we're going to start another week with the trough in the east and the ridge in the west, like we've been seeing a lot of lately. Now, let's put the maps into motion, because, you know, the patterns always have to evolve, and it's not going to stay like this forever. But you can see we head into this Thanksgiving week by the middle of the week with a huge ridge over the eastern Rockies, western portions of the Plain States, and that produces a dry weather pattern for a whole bunch of the country. Still kind of cold in the northeast, but the storm system is already offshore. As we head through Thanksgiving, kind of a tranquil weather pattern. Friday, still more or less zonal, as you can see there. And as we head into next week, our latest computer model is showing a big trough off the East Coast, but a big ridge over the Great Lakes and Mississippi Valley. That would really warm things up for a couple of days anyway, with the trough out west. Now, in my opinion, with this little ridge right here along the west coast of Canada, that trough is probably going to dig back in at some point after next Monday. So we're going to still be in an evolving situation, but overall, as we head into winter, I still expect the trough to be in the east and the ridge in the west more often than not. Here are the temperatures this week. I'm going below normal from the Carolinas, northward throughout the northeast, eastern Great Lakes, much of eastern Canada. Above normal for South Dakota, Nebraska, and most of the west, except for the far southwest. Near normal then for a lot of the southern states, as you can see. Taking a look at precipitation for this coming week, there's a couple of systems. A slow mover in South Texas, Southeast Texas, so I'm going above normal Louisiana, some of the surrounding states, South Florida as well. By the end of the week, this may expand northward, but I still think it'll be below normal in the central and northern Mississippi Valley, most of the east from North Carolina northward, and most of the rest of the plains down into the southwestern portions of the country. A couple of systems coming in out west, northern central California, Nevada, and the Pacific Northwest, probably above normal. Now, the 30-day outlook for temperatures, I'm still expecting overall below normal temperatures for most of the east, as you can see, except the southeast and South Florida, above normal from western Montana through the west coast. Precipitation over the next 30 days, below normal from Idaho across the northern plains into the far northern Great Lakes, and above normal from the nation's capital to North Florida back into eastern Texas. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Yakima, Washington, lots of sunshine, rather cold today, high of 42 degrees. San Antonio, Texas, cloudy with times of rain and drizzle, high of 54. And finally, Louisville, Kentucky, partly sunny on the chilly side, high around 48.
Older tractors with lots of life still left in them. Machinery Pete says there are a few out there, and they are priced to move. Next.
All in a Row, a new resource for crop and farm management information, is brought to you by Farm Journal and Valent USA.
Just because a tractor's a little older doesn't mean it still can't be useful. Machinery Pete has some pretty sweet deals on tractors from the 80s that are in great condition.
Well, I've seen some really nice auctions here taking place so far in November, folks. And in particular, I've seen some nice condition tractors from the 1980s. Now here's a picture of a 1985 John Deere 4650 two-wheel drive. And this sold on a farm auction up in Vermont, Michigan, central part of the state, a week ago Saturday, back on November 10th. Again, 2,350 actual hours, two-wheel drive, and it sold for $39,000. Now when I looked back in our Machinery Pete auction price data, over the last 19 years, that is the second highest auction price I've seen on a two-wheel drive 4650. And that auction was by our friend Brian Hasty. Now that same day, November 10th, over my way here in Minnesota, just up the road, little farming town of Dundas, Minnesota, a sale by Mehring Auction Company, they had this really sharp 1986 Case H 2096 two-wheel drive for sale. And this thing had 3,485 hours on it and went for $23,000. Now same thing here, I went back into our Machinery Pete auction price data, and folks, that's the highest auction price on a 2096 in 44 months. And if we go back farther, we go back 18 years, that's the fourth highest price. Now I do have my eye on one tractor coming up. It's December 8th, Kenyon, Minnesota, consignment auction by the same folks at Mehring Auction. And here's a picture of it. It's a 1990 John Deere 4455 mechanical front, 1,899 actual one owner hours on it, power shift. Now, how high do you think this baby's going to go?
How a group is honoring service members killed in the line of duty by providing a place of comfort.
AgDay, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields. In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. See the hardest working tractors in ag at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
When a military family loses a loved one in the line of duty, many people back home want to help honor their memory. A group of master gardeners is doing something to aid our service families. Charles Denny has more on their beautiful gifts.
Serene, gorgeous landscaping, an artistic gardener's touch that offers respect and sympathy. Clarksville master gardeners like Kim Weed spent nearly 300 volunteer hours here at Fort Campbell, working the grounds at this historic home. For the soldiers and families at the military base, it's known as the SOS House, Survivor Outreach Services. It's where people come for counseling or just time to grieve or reflect after a loved one is lost in the line of duty.
It was a part of making it a place that when they got out of their cars as they're walking up to the Survivor Outreach Services, that they felt the care that goes on inside the house reflected on the outside.
This project was made possible by community donations. A master gardening intern drew up a design plan, and then more than 1,400 plants were installed here the past few months.
The yard at the SOS House now includes Japanese maples, autumn ferns, hostas, and many other plants, a complete renovation of the grounds. Now the volunteers work to maintain the landscape.
It takes about 3 hours to water all these plants.
Wow.
And since they did, most of the plants went into the ground late May, first part of June, which, you know, at that time of the year the weather gets kind of iffy. And so, but we had the people out here watering and caring for the plants.
One of those people is Master Gardener Luis Almeida, retired from the military, and now his wife is stationed at Fort Campbell. Luis wanted to give back to other service families.
I hope when families come here they get a sense of tranquility and comfort. A lot of people come and they leave rocks, you know, with family members' names throughout the garden, and it be helpful for them to see a garden that's well maintained when they're leaving.
Landscaping is no substitute for a lost life, but this is caring grown from the ground up. Red, white, blue, and green. Plants and patriotism. For families of the fallen, it's our way of saying we are with you. This is Charles Denny reporting.
And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.